Hi, everybody. It's 5:01, so I think we're going to get started now. Hello and good afternoon to everybody. My name is James Condon. For those who don't know me, I'm the Rutgers Club president, and I'm really pleased to welcome you all here tonight to our program this evening. It's a virtual taste and learn, and we're going to enjoy a couple glasses of nice Italian wine. And we're going to learn all about Italian wine history and winemaking. And the person who's going to tell you all about this is Katie Califano. I'm very pleased to introduce you to her. She's a certified wine educator, and she's going to be the one to tell you all about tonight's wines. Certainly not me. And Katie, so can we start off by with a question from me about your accomplishments? Let me introduce you first, but I want to ask you a little bit more about yourself as well. Let me share with the audience the fact that you studied wine at Boston University. You've harvested wine in Tuscany. You earned the prestigious diploma in wine and spirits from the Wine and Spirits Education Trust in Manhattan. Currently, you are a wine specialist at Fedway Associates, and that is the largest wine distributor in New Jersey of wine and spirits. And in addition to that, you're also very busy raising a 2-year-old child. So much congratulations on all of that to you. And so, as I said, before we just jump into the program, I just wanted to ask, let everyone know that tonight's discussion is interactive, of course. And if you have any questions for Katie during the program, just submit your answers in the chat box, please. But please limit the chat to just the questions for Katie, so we don't overlook anything you want to ask her. And as I said, so to start things off, I just want to ask you one question up front. You're the first person that I've met who's attended university to study wine, which I think is just completely fascinating to me. So it's something I probably couldn't have conceived of when I was going to school. I mean, you basically decided very early in life that you were going to major in wine. And so I'd just like to know what went into that decision, and how did you decide to begin this professional journey to become a wine specialist?
Well, thank you, James. That's a very nice introduction, and welcome everybody. I'm so glad you're all attending. It's gonna be a fun day or fun event. But yeah, so how did I get into wine? So when I was a sophomore in college, I studied abroad in Tuscany, in Florence, which is quite common for a lot of undergraduates. And I just really fell in love with the culture, and wine was less expensive than soda at a restaurant. So my friends and I, we got quite accustomed to drinking Chianti with your dinners at every occasion. And when I returned back to school, I really wanted to pursue this idea of like food and culture and food and society. And there was a program at Boston University, and it was really in its inception when I applied there, and it was called gastronomy. And as a side elective, there was a wine course taught by a master of wine. And I took the course. I had no anticipation. I enjoyed wine, but I didn't think any more of it than that. And I'll never forget tasting a Chablis from France for the first time. And I was just shocked that it was actually Chardonnay grapes. I just was blown away because it's so stylistically different from anything I'd had. And I just caught the bug. And I kind of realized very quickly that the master's program that I was going for was going to be a struggle for me to find a career. So I made the decision to leave, and I just pursued the industry at a fast pace from that point on. But I was very young. So I was only maybe 23, 24 at the time. So I looked young. Nobody wanted to hire me because they didn't think I was old enough to drink. And I decided, all right, well, I gotta work a vineyard. So I volunteered in Tuscany on a Chianti vineyard to work a harvest. It was the best experience of my life. I learned a lot, and it was an amazing time. And then I came back, and I still struggled to get a job. It was crazy. So I started in retail. I was a cashier, and within a year, I got my job at Fedway. So the passion was I guess there, and I think it kind of people noticed that I had a lot of drive and a lot of passion. And then my company, Fedway Associates, is wonderful. They offered to pay for my wine education, and if I passed, I didn't have to pay a dime. And it was a good 3-year-long plus journey of traveling to Manhattan once a week. It was exhausting, but well worth it. And I was lucky enough to pass everything the first time. So there's many people that don't pass one section and they have to retake it or resit it. And I was really fortunate to pass everything. But that's my journey, and my job now, and hasn't changed much since I've gotten these certifications. It's, I do a lot of events like this, educational seminars. I do many wine dinners throughout the state, and I actually help restaurants kind of construct their wine list, organize the wines. I make wine presentations, and I do staff training. So that's kind of like my daily grind. But yeah, I couldn't imagine not making that decision at Boston University. Part of me regrets not finishing my master's, right? Because it's, you end up paying all those student loans for nothing. But if I had stayed, I don't know if I would have landed where I did today. So does that answer your question, James? Is that good?
Absolutely. I really thank you very much for sharing, the details about, a very interesting career choice. Until recently, I didn't know there was such a thing as a wine educator. So I think it's really interesting to hear a little bit more about your background, and hopefully that's informative. But to the audience about where you're coming from tonight and what your expertise is. But I don't want to delay any further. I want to turn the floor over to you, give you the virtual podium, and onward to the wine.
All right. Is everybody ready? Everybody have their wines? I'm hoping open. Enjoy a glass while I'm talking, so it's not so unentertaining. But I'm gonna briefly talk about the history of Italy, and this is kind of like when you learn about any wine region, history is imperative, and this is what makes wine so fun. So Italy's wine culture is one of the most significant in all of the world's wine history. So it dates back to pretty much the Greeks bringing grapes to Sicily in the first millennia BCE, right? And we know that there's data that viticulture happened in Georgia prior to that period, but the real cultural and viticultural significance of winemaking in a modern way, or what led to how things are today, really kind of stems back to the Greeks. So they landed on Sicily. There was indigenous grapes there, but they brought grapes with them. Greco di Tufo is one that's famous that comes from Greece, Alianico. And then it went from Sicily into the mainland and then spread north throughout the Mediterranean basin and onward. But really, we have to credit the Romans for a lot of the major Italian wine contributions. So the Romans, wine was part of their everyday life. It was safer to drink than water. So as the Romans were kind of conquering as much as they could of the world, they brought viticulture wherever they went. So the soldiers were bringing viticulture anywhere they conquered, and really kind of influencing everywhere. They're credited with bringing viticulture to the Mosel Valley of Germany. Also, some of France's most famous wine regions known today are either originated with the Romans or were influenced in a major way by the Romans. So we really have to credit them and their scholars for kind of documenting these early times of wine, viticultural practices, what wines were popular and what regions were great. So Pliny the Elder is the most famous wine scholar. But yeah, so Italians we owe them a lot in the wine world, and I certainly think that they're the originators or the spreaders of fine wine and viticulture. And it was such a part of their everyday that the Roman emperor at one time had to command people to rip up vines because they were planting so much vineyards, they had no food. He was like, pull up those vines, we need to plant some wheat or something here, we have nothing to eat. So that's how much Italian wine was a part of their culture back then with the Romans. And today, nothing's really changed. I mean, the Italian population drinks on average 70 liters of wine per person per year. We consume on average 3 liters. So we have a lot of work to do. And I hope this seminar encourages you all to drink more wine in a safe way, of course. But yeah, so we don't drink nearly as much as the Italians do. And it's because it's part of, they see it as a part of food on the table. It's a commodity. It's no different than having salt and pepper on the table. It's just a major part of everyday life. So Italy is combined of 20 kind of regions, or 20 regions, I would say, and all of them make wine, which is unheard of globally in the world, that every single place has a vineyard somewhere and makes wine. That's kind of really unique to Italy. And as I'm going to move into the kind of landscape and geography and climate a little bit here. So this is a map of Italy in a geographic and kind of topographical sense. So you can see it is cupped by the Alps in the north, which kind of borders it from France and Switzerland. And then the Apennine Mountains run the whole length of Italy like a spine. And you can see there is not a lot of flat land here. So Italy is 80% mountains or hillsides. Now, when you get into learning about wine, you want to be in the mountains or on the hills. It's everything to wine quality. There are exceptions to the rule, of course, but a lot of fine wine, you will read in a text sheet or hear from a presenter, comes from a hillside or on top of a mountain. The Po Valley, that's kind of really flat. Guess what comes from there towards Verona and Venice? Pinot Grigio, Prosecco, some of the stuff that's made in a bulk way that's inexpensive. So there you can machine harvest, but as we move into the Alps and along the Apennine, you have to really kind of hand harvest and really pay attention to quality. And as you can see, so it's 750 miles long. It's super long. It's a peninsula. As you can see, it's surrounded by water. So everything is impacted by the oceans in some way, which is great for winemaking. Again, so it's a Mediterranean climate, so we'll get very hot in the summer. I don't know if any of you have ever traveled in June, July, August. I don't recommend it. It can be very hot in Italy, like unbearably hot. So these moderating influences also are a huge influence in quality wine there. And as you can see, it's got Sardinia and Sicily, the two largest islands of the Mediterranean, as a part of their nation. And you can see it's shaped like a boot. So when we kind of talk about wine regions, we'll say, like the heel of the boot or the toe of the boot, or Sicily's like them kicking a soccer ball. So kind of just wanted you to visualize the shape and how mountainous it actually is. There's very little flat land, so there is bulk wine production in Italy, but less than there was in the past. Let's move on. So briefly, I only bring this up because I get questions about it almost every time. This is the wine law or wine classification pyramid for Italian wine. So what's interesting is that this did not happen until 1963. The French had come up with their classification in 1937. So when you think about that, you're like, wow, for Italy having such a rich history in wine, why did it take them so long to get their act together, really? And it really stems back to the fact that Italy was a fragmented place of these individual, almost like states, that totally were isolated from each other. There was no communication. They were their own little kingdoms. And Italy didn't become a unified nation until about 100 years before their wine classification. So there was no team effort. There was no group effort on marketing wine, on controlling quality, as the French had done. So the French, a good 100 years before the Italians, they were coming up with the Bordeaux classification system. The Bordeaux classification system, 1855, one of the most famous in the industry today. They were laying the groundworks for fine wine and marketing fine wine globally and in France. So the Italians are a little bit behind the 8 ball there, but it is a useful pyramid. And I do have to note that just because there is the DOCG at the top of the pyramid. There is no indication of quality in the sense of how much you're going to enjoy the wine. There are some really enjoyable wines at the IGT or Indicazione Geografica Tipica level, and it's to note that Vino de Tavola, which is the very entry level bulk wine part of the base of the pyramid. Once upon a time, Super Tuscans were categorized in that category because they didn't fit anywhere else. So this is all relative, but as you get further up the pyramid, the quality restrictions become tighter. So you will find that the chances of you getting a fine wine or a good quality wine are higher. But the heart and soul is the DOC, Denominazione di Origine Controllata. So it's just meaning this is a defined geographic area, and we're going to allow only these certain grapes to be grown for this wine, and in this percentage, and you have to age it for this amount of time or no aging at all. And there's other restrictions that go on the viticultural level. It's very, very strict. The IGT level is a little bit more loose. So this category allows the producer to use grapes that are maybe not allowed at the DOC level or higher. And DOCG is, the G is just garantita, so it's the same as DOC, but you get that extra stamp from the government. So those wines in DOC, DOCG level are controlled by a consortium of growers, of actual winemakers. So they oversee every producer's product, and they actually you have to pass through a panel of tasters. So you can't just go about labeling a wine without it being actually tasted by a group of people to ensure that you're on par with everybody else. Any questions so far? Am I good, Nelson? Yes, okay. All right, so Piedmont, my favorite. So this is where the Gavi is coming from. I don't know what producer you have. It doesn't matter too much. Most Gavi is made in a very similar way. So you should feel pretty confident no matter who you pick, that it's going to be of similar quality. But Piedmont is in the northwest corner. So I'm going to just go back. So it's in the northwest corner of Italy. So it borders France and Switzerland. And it's cupped by the Alps on three sides. So it's extremely influenced by the Alps. Piede in Italian means foot, monte means mountain. So that's where the name Piemonte comes from. And this is the wine geeks' mecca when it comes to Italian wine, right? This is the home of Barolo and Barbaresco, Nebbiolo-based wines that are meant for aging forever. But there's so much more to explore here, and that's why I kind of wanted to feature a Gavi or something different. And there are other grapes that you consume on an everyday level, like Barbera and Dolcetto, which are two red grapes. But they also have some beautiful whites. One is Cortese grape that makes Gavi wine, and the other is Arnese, which makes a varietal wine as well. But being so close to the Ligurian Sea and the Alps, you get this tug of war between the cold air from the Alps and the warm air from the Ligurian Sea. And it creates this huge kind of like variation in temperature from night to day. And this fog rolls in the morning, and it kind of blankets the area and burns off during the day. So most of the prized wine growing regions sit above the floor and above the fog line. And that's because you get more sun exposure there. So therefore your grapes are much riper. So that was just a brief kind of overview of the area. And you can see how many appellations there are, or DOCs or DOCGs. And you notice that Italian wine, why it's so confusing for students. So they have over 2,000 indigenous grapes in Italy, and 350 are allowed for wine. So it's even at 350, it's a lot. But you have to remember the Italians being so separate as regions for the longest time before coming unified, they all have their own name for the same grape. So, you know, the same grape in Piedmont might be called something else in, I don't know, I'm going to say Liguria. So it becomes absolutely confusing. And they also name their regions or their DOCs after either the grape the place or town, or it can be grape of a certain place. So Gavi has nothing to do with the grape. Gavi is actually the town. So it's a super small area in the southeast of Piedmont, and it has these limestone soils, which are fantastic for making white wine. And if you've never had a Gavi, I just think it's so underrated as a crisp Italian white. I mean, I just like to see people experience something outside of maybe Pinot Grigio, which is delightful, but when you have it all the time, it loses its novelty. So Gavi is one of those really crisp, dry white wines. It very rarely sees any aging in an oak barrel, so it's super fresh. And at its best, it can be like a Chablis. It could be really beautiful. So this is my go-to white if I'm making homemade bolognese. I love to just, use this as my cooking white, but I love to drink it as I'm cooking. It's absolutely delightful. And I have this little picture of the hills. So this is actually in the Barolo province, this picture, but I wanted to show you this one. So this is the coolest part about Piedmont, right? It is the most beautiful landscapes you'll ever see. I mean, so that's the Alps. On a clear day, you can see them from anywhere you're standing. And you can see how hilly it is and how every vineyard kind of faces a different way. It's absolutely stunning. And if you're a foodie, it's the only other reason you go here. I mean, this is not a touristic attraction kind of place. There's not really a lot of Renaissance art there. There's not a lot of ruins or anything that to go visit. So what Piedmont is known for is fantastic wine and amazing food that has a lot to do with the French influence being so close to the border. So you get, I would say it's Italian ingredients with French technique. So if you are a foodie, it is the best food of Italy, in my humble opinion. And if you want to know like a few famous things that come from here, Ferrero Rocher chocolates come from Piedmont. They have amazing hazelnuts and any kind of agnolotti pasta, truffles come from here. So it's really kind of a fun place to visit, but don't plan on doing anything but eating and drinking the entire time you're there, because that's all there's really to do. I'm going to keep moving. Please don't hesitate to ask questions. I know I can't really see the chats, but Nelson's going to alert me if anyone has a question.
Hey, Katie. We have just a couple people with comments. Vince mentioned that he's drinking the Via Sparina Gavi.
Oh, I've actually never had that one.
And let's see. Tara mentioned that the Gavi that she's having is delicious, and Bill Fennelly mentioned that he's having the Principessa
nice.
Gavi.
Okay. Yep, that's from Bonfi. That's a cute story. It's a little romantic and made up, so I'm not going to go there. But that's a classic Italian thing to do, right? Like everything has a legend or a story that seems so unbelievable. But yeah, like me, Gavi's all lemon in the nose. It's very citrusy. And over the time since before I signed on, it's really kind of opened up a lot. So now I'm getting more floral notes. But this is a great aperitif wine. And I thought over the summer months, this could be a great inexpensive white to entertain with friends and family, because it doesn't necessarily need food, but with any kind of like, I can imagine like an antipasto platter with some salty meats and cheeses. What it will do is it will help, the salt in those products will help calm down the acidity in the wine. And what you'll experience on your palate is more of the fruit and the structure of the wine itself. So definitely a fun wine to drink on its own. It's refreshing and easy, but it's also a great prepared wine.
Liz also had two things. One, she asked if you could point to Gavi on the map again.
Yes,
and then she said that she Marchesi di Barolo is excellent.
Oh, it's one of my favorite. I actually went there. So if you see this black arrow, it's this tiny little place. It's amazing how small it is. I've never been personally to Gavi, but I've been to Piedmont 3 times because I'm obsessed. I dream of the food, no joke. Like I literally cannot wait to go back. But one of my favorite personal wine regions is called Doliani, which I don't even see on the map, but it's known for Dolcetto. I just adore the wines, amazing. And Marchesi di Barolo, if you do go to Piedmont and you go to the town of Barolo, it's the only winery I've ever experienced in Italy where you can walk in and do a tasting without an appointment. So Italy is not like Napa at all, where it's just kind of like a tasting room after tasting room after tasting room. You kind of can like do a crawl. In Italy, you have to have an appointment, and you know, be prepared to spend 3 hours plus, because they're so passionate and they have a lot to say. And you usually will get like the owner or somebody in the family. So it's a totally different experience. But Marchesi di Barolo is the exception to the rule in that sense. So moving on.
Well, Bill Fennelly asks, what city might we know in the province?
So Torino is the capital. That's the most famous. I've never been. Alba is another not famous city, but another popular city, the city of Alba. But like I said, it's not some place that your first time to Italy you're going to focus on going to, just because, you know, either it's Milan or Florence or Rome, and rightfully so. I mean, that's how I would kind of instruct anyone that's going, is to go to Venice or somewhere like that. And then second time around, you spend more time at the smaller cities or towns. Any other questions?
Just one comment and one question. Kelly Francisco said, and excuse my pronunciation, is it my Broglia la Marana open up nicely? Okay.
I don't know that one either. I'm so glad people found interesting producers. I don't carry many in my portfolio, but I have, I carry La Scolca, which has been around since early 1900s. So if you've ever seen La Scolca Black Label, that's a super famous Gavi. It's not cheap, but really delicious. But yes, I'm glad everyone's really had some nice experiences with Gavi. It's kind of under the radar white of the area.
Now, the one question Tara asked, what goes into harvesting wine, and what was that experience like?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So harvesting wine is some of the hardest work you will ever do, if you ever do it. So it was waking up very early every day before the sun rose. And usually the vineyards were pretty wet or kind of damp with like a kind of morning dew. And I would get yelled at by old Italian men who spoke no English and would just point and yell and pick that row. And so you just pick grapes with a cutter and put them in a little crate. And I'd usually have to walk uphill to the tractor, drop them at the tractor, get another crate, go back. And then when we filled up the tractor, we would go to the winery facility area. The grapes would be destemmed and pumped into a vat where they would start the fermentation process. But this winery was organic that I worked at, and they were old school. So I got to crush grapes with my feet, which they actually used that juice to kind of kickstart the fermentation in the other wines that they were making. But I will tell you, picking grapes was so exhausting. And there's a lot of flies in the vineyard, and they would just get in your eye, and you wouldn't be able to see. So a lot of times I would put my t-shirt like as far as I could over my head, so I could see through the t-shirt and cut grapes without getting bugs in my eyes. And but I mean, it was such a fun experience. And we wouldn't eat dinner until like 9:30, 10 o'clock at night, because you got done so late. It was just these long meals, and you'd be up till like 12:30 or 1 in the morning, and you wake up at 5. It was just a really fun experience, but it's absolutely backbreaking work. And some regions are harder than others, but where I was, it wasn't so bad. It was just very hilly, kind of exhausting. Answer everyone's questions. I don't want to miss out. Okay. Moving forward, why my screen's not moving. Okay, so we're gonna move to southern Italy, and we're gonna taste a wine next from Sicily. So as I kind of alluded to in the beginning of the presentation, I mean, Sicily is where it all started, right? Thanks to the Greeks. If you know anything about geography, I wonder if the first map shows a little more. Okay, this does. So look at what is, I have a pointer here. So can you see my little cursor here? This is the tip of Africa, North Africa. That's how close Sicily is to Africa. So to give you a perception of the temperature on some parts of the island, it can get very, very hot and it's very sunny. So it's a really unique place. It's a triangle shaped island. It's the largest in, like I said, in the Mediterranean. And it boasts a really rich kind of wine culture, but one that is not known for quality. And that is changing in a major way, which is very exciting and why I wanted to talk about it today. But this is a place where it was one country or one culture that dominated Sicily after the other for like a 2,000-year span. So the Arabs were here, the Phoenicians were here, the Greeks, the Normans were a part of the landscape for a long time. So all these cultures kind of brought their own flair to the history of Sicily. And if you've ever went to Sicily or met a Sicilian, they look totally different from mainland Italians. Their dialect is extremely different. So they kind of think of themselves as almost their own country. And it's they have some of the most amazing wines, but their biggest production is white. And I know that makes no sense, right? Because typically we think the hotter the climate, the better suited to red grapes, which they do have, but they actually grow a lot of white grapes there. So as you can see in this kind of map, the geography a little bit, its most famous topographical feature is Mount Etna, right? It's an active volcano, 11,000 feet in elevation. It's snow-capped for half the year. So you have that kind of climate, snow-capped, cool, high elevation volcanic hills. And then as you move kind of south and west, it becomes slightly flatter and much hotter. So a really unique place in the fact that you can grow a multitude of different grapes there. But this also is just a visual of Sicily with Mount Etna in the background. And you can see that the hills are a little bit, more undulating. They're not as kind of steep and high as in Piedmont. But for the longest time, quality was not a focus in Sicily. It was all about bulk wine. I think only 18% of the wine made in Sicily is actually bottled. That means the rest is sold in bulk. And I've been to a place in Italy once where I went into a cooperative winery, which means many families kind of bring their grapes to one place and there's one winemaker that makes wine and it's very inexpensive. It was literally gas pumps of wine. So they had, like a nozzle and they'd fill up their big container. Think of like a plastic water container that you see at a water cooler in an office. Fill it up with wine and go on their way. That's still very much a part of the Italian table, is this kind of bulk wine that's very cheap. That's Sicily. That was Sicily for the longest time. It still is. But Mount Etna really is kind of putting Sicily on the quality wine map. If you've never had a wine from Etna, I highly recommend you do. So the two grapes to know there, Nero Cappuccio and Nero Mascalese are the red grapes, and then Catarratto and Caricante are the whites. They are absolutely stunning, and I didn't suggest them for the tasting today, only because finding them is a little bit more difficult in a retail environment, and they're not cheap. They can tend to be kind of expensive. But we're tasting the signature red of the area, and that's Nero d'Avola. So Nero meaning black. This is in reference to the dark color of the grape. Avola being the town. So Nero d'Avola, highly underrated grape. I always say Nero d'Avola is a great wine for the consumer who loves New World wines, right? So California, Australia, Chile, Argentina, the wines that are kind of a little bit softer on the palate, smoother. They come from hotter regions where the grapes get very ripe. Sicily is that place, right? It's just as hot as California and everywhere else. But what you get with any Italian wine is this earthiness or rusticity that just never leaves Italy. You can plant anything you want here, Cabernet, Chardonnay, Merlot, Cabernet Franc. It doesn't matter. They're always going to have this essence of Italy. So that's really unique. So it's a good stepping stone for somebody who's kind of stuck in California and is afraid to venture out into the old world wine regions of Italy and France. Out of fear of kind of that different profile. So Sicily is a great starting point. So I don't know how many of you have ever had a Nero, but it's delicious. So it's great pizza wine, by the way. If you've never tried this with any kind of basic tomato sauce-based pasta or pizza, heaven. And luckily, it's not that expensive on many levels. There are some very prestigious examples that are very expensive, but I think it gets lost, the actual nature of the grape. So I do think that the entry-level versions are the best. But it's all this like dark fruit, dark cherry, prune-like. Remember, it's hot, so you take any kind of fruit that you would think of, like cherries, plums, currants, blackberries, right? And then think about baking them and how they change in flavor and aroma from when they were fresh to when they were cooked. And that's kind of how wine or grapes kind of transition their flavors when you take them into a hot climate. So you do get this like freshness to this wine in terms of some red fruit, but you do also get this kind of baked dried fruit aroma that I always say is kind of pruny to me. And then on a palate, because it's coming from a warm climate, it's a little bit higher in alcohol. It's very smooth, very easy to drink. It's got nice freshness from the acidity, but it's not overbearing, right? It's not a big Cabernet. I mean, it could look like a Cabernet or Merlot in the glass, but on the palate, it's going to drink much smoother. So I'm just curious. I want to get the comment screen up here.
If you can't see it, can you see it?
Yeah, like it goes away. There we are. Okay. So what were the wines?
So, yeah, you got it.
I know Cusimano is good. Yeah, I've never heard of Torre Racina. And then the last question, Colozzi, another great one. So two excellent Sicilian wines. So if you find, so there's Etna Rosso and Etna Bianco. I'm trying to think of producers that are pretty readily available. Terre Nere is one that's very good. Not cheap, but good. And then Altamora is one that I carry by the Cusimanos. That's outstanding. And Ariana Ochopinski, who's a young female winemaker in Mount Etna, and she makes her wine in a very kind of non-interventionist way. So if you've ever heard of the term natural wine, she's considered a natural wine producer. Those wines are absolutely stunning. I probably think you wouldn't find them outside of like a high-end restaurant. They're kind of allocated out. Benanti is another good producer. So I would, if you're interested in trying an Etna wine, go into a retail store and say, do you have any Etna wines? And then another fact is that by law, they have to have 80% Nerello Mascalese for Etna Rosso. So a lot of producers don't like to be held to that restriction. So they'll classify their wines as Terre Siciliane, which is actually an IGT level wine, because they want to be able to kind of blend however they want. So you can also find some amazing Terre Siciliane wines that are awesome. So I hope that answers the question. I'm so cool. This is great. I haven't heard of a lot of these producers. You can imagine that for me, I kind of have to stick within my portfolio a lot of times. So whenever I get to play a little bit more, it's usually when I go to Manhattan, which I haven't done in a long time. But yes, she was featured on Stanley Tucci. Yeah, I've heard that's an amazing series, and I unfortunately don't have that channel. But all of my friends are always asking me if I've seen it, because I just love Italian wine, and I think Stanley Tucci is awesome actor. With everybody, I mean, that's kind of the show. I mean, if you want to know a little bit about other pairings, so Sicily's famous for, you got to thank the Arabs for bringing rice here. Okay, if it wasn't for the Arabs, we would never have arancini, right? Which, if you've never had that, it's the most scrumptious fried rice ball that's usually stuffed with some kind of leftover meats or cheeses or vegetables. Absolutely heaven. They're known for their seafood, right? So tuna and swordfish. Wines like this Nero, if you blacken the tuna or grill the tuna or swordfish, kind of adding that char and texture, the Nero can hold up to that. And if you do like a shellfish dish with like a red tomato sauce over pasta, another bridge ingredient that helps you pair seafood with red wine, which is often quite a difficult thing to do. And trying to think of some other famous food items from Sicily. What wine would I want to drink? Oh my gosh, that's so hard. I have to say, I adore champagne. It's a problem. It's a very expensive problem, and I have the ability to it just totally fascinates me. And so on that end, although that would love that to be my stranded island wine, I'd probably pick a Chianti Classico. I mean, remember, that's kind of where I started in this industry, and I just adore Chianti. Anything Sangiovese based, it's by far my favorite go-to wine. It's typically the kind of wines I buy for my house. But I'm all over the place. Obviously I'm in this career for a reason, but I love all wines, dessert wines, sparkling wines, white, rosé, red, it doesn't matter. I have such a deep appreciation and enthusiasm for all wine types. Even if I don't enjoy them, I do have that kind of level of respect and appreciation for what went into that bottle or what went into that wine. Caponata, good call, very good call. And pasta alla norma, that's got eggplant in it. So they're huge on eggplant. Granita, yes. So wait, can we open it up to anybody who wants to say anything now that the presentation's over? What do you think, Nelson?
Yeah, we can.
Because I'd like to, if anybody wants to not be embarrassed or, wants to make a comment about maybe their travels to Italy, or, I'd like to open it up too, because I love hearing stories, and I've never been to Sicily. So I know that it's gorgeous, but I've never been. So if anyone's been to Italy or to Sicily or Piedmont or anywhere else, I'd love to hear from you.
So I actually, I'd like to second your comment about, it's not the place for sort of winery hopping. My husband and I took a trip to Tuscany, and, be prepared. Just be prepared to spend some time at each of the wineries.
Absolutely, Kelly, right? And like the biggest mistake people make is making too many appointments. I always tell people make one a day, because it will take your whole day. You will most likely get a buzzy feeling after the day, and you're going to be exhausted. So you're just going to want to go back to your hotel, try to have an espresso, recuperate for dinner. And I was like, it just becomes, they're so passionate, and you want to give them the time. So that's a great story.
Okay, there are a couple comments in the chat. I don't know if you can see.
Oh, so Perry, thank you for bringing that up. I was going to go through each region and kind of mention like what they're famous for, but obviously 20 regions would have taken so much time, and we kind of, James and Nelson and myself were just like, that's just too much to go through. But Abruzzo is known for Montepulciano, the grape, and it's also known for a white grape called Pecorino, which if you've never had it, it's delightful, very good. And that is where La Flora pasta is made. One of the most famous Montepulciano d'Abruzzo producers I've ever had, and it's so delicious, is a Medio Pepe. Write it down, bucket list purchase. If you go to an Italian restaurant, you see it, it's gonna cost a bit, but these wines age beautifully. They do not lose their vibrancy. So that is something that a lot of people discredit the Montepulciano grape, is they see it as kind of like your everyday of the week kind of wine, where it's really one of those grapes that just doesn't age doesn't show age quickly, and it holds on forever. So I highly recommend Emidio Pepe if you find it. It's one of those wines that is a really special occasion wine for me. Yeah. All right. So as a sparkling wine lover, I know all about Italian sparkling wines. So the most famous is Franciacorta, which I'm going to share the screen again. Just bear with me. Let's go back. So Franciacorta is located in Lombardia, so in where Milan is located, and it's a French style sparkling, but it's very much like champagne. The rules are almost identical in terms of production. The grapes are slightly different, obviously, because we're talking Italy. But I do have to say, you will get a beautiful Franciacorta for half the price as some of the top champagne producers, and you'll be wowed. So Ca del Bosco is one of the most famous. I adore it, adore it. It's probably one of my favorite sparkling wines. Otherwise, Trento DOC from Trentino Alto Adige area, they make some beautiful sparkling wines as well. Ferrari is a producer that is readily available, and they make a stunning Blanc de Blanc from Chardonnay that's made in like a champagne method style. That's awesome. And if you love Prosecco, try a Prosecco Superiore. That's a qualification level that's higher than the basic beer we see all the time. And the restrictions are much higher. You're getting grapes that are hand harvested from the hills. And my favorite of that category is Nino Franco. By far one of the best Proseccos in the industry right now. Hold on one second. Trying to make sure I don't miss anyone's comments here. I got the Abruzzi.
There was one question. What temperature do you suggest we serve the Nero at? I don't know if you answered that one.
That's a good question. So I always say our houses are too warm, right? So room temperature is not an accurate guide. If you want to be really nerdy about it and you don't have a wine fridge, I always pop the red wine in the refrigerator for 20 minutes before you serve it. And opposite with whites, right? So you chill the whites down ahead of time in the refrigerator, pull the whites out 20 minutes before service, because most of the time our refrigerators are way too cold. On the Ripasso, am I making? Yeah, awesome. So Ripasso comes from, let me share the screen again. Ripasso comes from the Veneto, and it's, I kind of like to call it a baby Amarone. So it comes from the area of Valpolicella, which is kind of east of Verona, which if you've never been to Verona, another charming small city where actually Italy is located every year. So what they do is for Amarone production, they take the grapes and they dry them on straw mat from about whenever they harvest in September, October usually, all the way through December, sometimes January. So what you get is almost like a plump raisin. It's literally all the water has evaporated out of the grape. And when they press the wine to make Amarone, you can imagine there's very little juice. That's why Amarone is extremely, extremely expensive. Now, when they get done with making Amarone, they keep those the skins in the pulp that they pressed. And what they'll do is they'll take the entry-level Valpolicella wine that they made for everyday consumption, kind of think of like a basic Chianti, and they'll pass it over, ripasso, over the skins and the leftover pomace from the Amarone production. And what happens is a second fermentation where it bolsters up the alcohol, it adds those dried fruit aromas and flavors that you get in an Amarone into the wine. So it's a great value if you don't have the money to spend on Amarone. I mean, it's not the same thing, but it gives you a perception of the aroma profile and the flavor profile. So yeah, ripassos are a lot of fun. Massi, I don't even sell Massi, but Massi Campofiorin is very good. Castellina and Chianti. That's a great place. Some of my favorite producers come from there. Sure. The name of the Prosecco was Nino Franco. If anyone has any questions, Nelson and James have my email, and I never mind helping anyone with a wine question or suggestion. So don't feel shy. Email me. I'm totally fine with it. It's something I'm passionate about, so I love to help. I just want to be sure.
And you can certainly reach out to either myself or just to the Rutgers Club. Contact us on the website, whichever's easier for you, and we can make sure to put you in touch with Katie.
Yeah, and I didn't touch upon the grapes used for Ripasso, but the major grapes of the Valpolicella area are Corvina, Rondinella, and Molinara. Those are the three major grapes, but Corvina is the most famous. Any other questions? Did you all have fun? I hope you all learned something. I hope it wasn't too nerdy. I have a problem. I can't help myself sometimes. I go on tangents, so I apologize if I lost you.
Well, Katie, I'll just say I really appreciate it. It was really, really eye-opening. I really had no concept of what it was like, how many classifications and how many varieties of Italian wine there are. I mean, I'll be honest with you, my knowledge of wine goes no deeper than red or white. So for me, this was really just a huge eye-opener and immensely enjoyable. And I just really want to thank you for talking to all our members tonight and their guests about Italian wine. It was really fascinating. I mean, really more than I expected. Okay. And I really appreciate how you opened up everything to the audience. I think everybody got a real kick out of getting to participate in the conversation with you. It was really, really nice.
I find that the questions are the best part of my presentations always, because you can imagine there's so much to say and you just kind of get in the moment and you might forget to bring something up, and you all did a great job of reminding me of things that I wanted to talk about today. So I really appreciate the questions.
Well, we're all in this together, and we have great members, and I want to thank them for coming tonight. I do hope you all enjoyed a virtual taste and learn. And I want to thank you, and I want to thank Nelson Gonzalez for doing tech support and monitoring the questions. I want to thank also big thanks go out to our special events committee members, Liz Marquez and Judy Marino, who run that. They're the big force behind tonight's program. I hope you enjoyed it because we do have more programs coming. Stay tuned for your inbox. We're going to have a big event, I believe, in June, and you'll all hear about that. And I'm very excited to tell you more details when I can. So more to come, folks. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it tonight. I enjoyed it. Thanks, Katie, and thanks to everyone.
You're welcome. Thank you, everybody, and hope to see you all soon. Maybe we could do another event in the future, and I hope we can do it live sometime because I'm much better in person. But
I'd love to get you back and do this event live in the club as soon as that's possible.
Yeah,
don't know when that's going to be, but as soon as possible.
Let's hope sooner than later. But hope everyone is healthy and has a great summer if I don't see you before then. But thank you all so much.
Thank you all. You've been great tonight.
Bye.
Bye now.